Coming to you live from the palatial studios of PBJ Productions. Welcome to Patrick and BJ Talk Real Estate, where we talk about life, the universe, and everything as it relates to real estate. Hey everybody, it's BJ.
And Patrick.
And we're back talking all things real estate, and I have to lead today with, is this the last hurrah?
Isn't it always?
Right? Because rental prices are at the highest that they've ever been in 30 years.
Who are we blaming for this now?
It's got to be the government, right?
It's got to be the government. You know what? The more rental restrictions they've put on municipalities or provinces,
Right.
the worse the rentals. I'm getting carried away because I read an article for Seattle and they removed all the restrictions and all of a sudden they had a whole bunch of rental construction.
Yeah.
They flooded the supply and now rents are like reasonable. I don't know the details about Seattle or anything that, but
so
I can get carried down a rabbit hole
right?
really quickly.
But what we are talking about is there was a recent article and report in CTV News, and this goes back to
CTV News again.
Yeah, so
awesome.
this goes back to the fall. But I'm going to read you the headline: rental prices in Canada increased to their highest in 30 years.
Wow.
So, and that's just a fact. There's you know you can have an opinion about it one way or the other, but that's the fact. The rental prices have increased to their highest number in the last 30 years.
And that's a generalization across Canada. So the rental prices in Victoria might not be the same that are in Vancouver or Halifax.
Sure.
And they could vary and fluctuate.
Yeah, it's a percentage. Yeah. So let me put that in perspective.
Okay.
So for British Columbia, the increase in rent in the summer was 5.4% in July and 5.8% in August.
Okay.
Okay. Now it's interesting if I put something else in perspective. In Newfoundland, their increase in rent in August was 8.4%. But if that number is already lower to start with, right? The percentages can be deceiving, but it's real for the people in that market.
Right, but what is the actual dollar amount?
Yeah, and they didn't publish the dollar amounts. So on average for Canada. And again, we've talked about this before also, that we are such a diverse country and such a massive country that it's hard to give a general number that makes sense for all of it. Yeah. But again, over the summer, we saw a 5.5% increase in July, and we saw a 6.5% increase in August.
Okay.
In rents. Okay. And so let me read this from the article. Canadians are paying more for housing as of August 2023 than in the past 3 decades, according to StatsCan.
Right. And we've just gone through like an inflationary period with the government printing money during, that time.
Right.
Right. But looking at statistical information, I'm just going to bring this up. There used to be a Canadian real estate investor magazine that I used to get every month, used to come to the house. And, it would cover different provinces and major cities, and it would recommend where are some places that you might consider as a real estate investor to invest money in. And I'm just thinking oh, wow, the highest rent there is. I'm like, this must be a great time to invest some money into a rental property.
Right.
But what was deceiving was the percentages.
Sure.
So in the same year, Victoria prices went up, maybe 9 or 10%, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it was Saskatoon went up like 90%.
Okay. Yeah.
But the thing is, houses in Saskatoon were $100,000.
Yeah.
Or less, or a little bit more, but that was the average.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then prices in Victoria were like $900,000. We went up the same dollar amount.
Right.
But the percentages looked very sensationalized.
Yeah. And I would say that,
it's pretty deceiving.
I think the one thing we have to keep in mind, and we all want to keep in mind when it comes to those percentages, is as sensational as that number looks, it's still a real number if you live in, let's say you live in wherever, in Saskatchewan as an example, and your annual income is based, and you've based everything on a mortgage on $100,000, and suddenly the home value, or you were going to move and now you have to double your mortgage payment and everything else because the prices have jumped that much into your next step of home. So it's real for them.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So I think we need to understand that. But
real numbers is like what people really need to look at. Like, I just think the percentages can be deceiving.
Sure, yeah.
In a lot of other data that
it can
we consider and look at.
Yeah, it can sensationalize the problem one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right. So, so it's an interesting conversation because we've talked about why do we think that's happening. There's been talk about, is it the immigration? Is it foreign students coming in? And let's say there's a part of students coming in that they need a place to live, and in general, they are going to be renting. So they're taking some part of that rental pool.
Right. So looking at any like post-secondary education town, we'll have a portion of the population as renters that are outside of student housing accommodations.
Right. And I do know there's some talk from the government about identifying who can actually bring students in from an educational point of view, because there are institutions that they issue diplomas. You don't get a degree from them, but they still bring in international students.
Oh, and they might not be like the accredited, like it's not the University of Victoria, University of Toronto, McGill,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be like
something else. The way that
private university.
Yeah, whatever it is, but they're not necessarily degree granting. So there's some talk about putting some limitations on what qualifications you have to have when you're coming here in terms of the education program you're going to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And these would be recognized. We'll go down a rabbit hole then if I ask questions like this. Like, are those private institutions recognized the same as like?
And they
University of X, right?
Yeah, they didn't say. That was in the article, but without any real details, except to say that, and they were very clear that for some of these places, it's just a cash cow. Because international students,
possibly.
Well, now we're not talking about, and in the article I read, they were not talking about degree granting institutions. Mm-hmm. They're talking about these other institutions that are giving a diploma or something like that, and it's a carte blanche statement to say they're all doing this. They're all doing it just as a cash cow. That's not what we're saying here. I'm just referring to what the article specifically said, which was that for some of them, that's what they're doing, according to this article. So,
but we're talking about how it affects rental.
So, talking about the rental prices, certainly there's some part to that, because we have people that are coming and need a place to live, and they're not going to be home buyers. I think there's more to it in terms of the rental market than just the foreign students that are coming. The other part of that is the housing market and the interest rates that go with that.
Right. There's a lot of factors in there, but we're, like I keep saying in other videos, we're in the middle of a foreign buyer ban nationally.
Yeah.
So unless you achieve your permanent residency status, then there's some other exemptions, but that's sort of like the biggest one.
Yeah.
To get past.
Right.
To qualify.
Sure.
And then be able to like purchase real estate. But that holds a lot of people back as renters, I think.
Yeah.
You know, that's got to be a definite segment to all of this.
Sure. I think, and that goes with the other part, is just where interest rates make it so that someone can no longer afford to buy a condo or buy a home.
Get on the property ladder.
Right.
Yeah.
So now they have to take a step back and stay as a renter, whereas otherwise they would have already stepped into that market of purchasing a home, and then thereby they step out of the rental pool.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
So, you know, and it's interesting because they mention it right here in the CTV report. Part of the reason for higher rental prices is due to a higher interest rate. When Canadians are not able to afford homes, they rent for longer, decreasing a city's rental vacancy rate and putting upward pressure on prices.
I think that explains it.
I was going to say that pretty well synopsizes it for me, right into a nutshell of what they're talking about. Because the reality is rental prices have been going up and are going up. It's just a supply and demand thing.
It's the same problem with market housing, right?
Sure.
They're one and the same.
Sure.
Or how about they're closely related?
Yeah. So to put that back into where we live, we know that we have a very low vacancy rate in the Greater Victoria area.
Historically low, yeah. It's like
Yeah.
less than 1% vacancy
Right.
rate most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember talking to somebody who was a landlord, and he thought that that number was actually, the vacancy rate is a negative number. Because what he said is you've got situations where there's maybe 3 people living in a condo, but one of them sleeping on the couch while they look for another place. But they're not part of that.
They're not in the pool yet.
Right. So
Yeah.
they're not part of that statistic.
What about homeowners, landlords that choose not to rent suites? I haven't had my suite rented for like 10 years now.
Right.
Just we grew into our house.
Right.
First it was like, okay, I can handle it financially. And then as our kids got older, we grew into the suite and we used the suite as
Sure.
our own.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that, yeah.
So I got a
100%.
nice big office.
There you go. There you go. 100%. So, I guess what we're saying is the rental prices are a real issue, but to say it's just one thing, it's not just one thing, right?
There's a lot of factors.
There's more than one
if
factor.
it's somebody
here.
on the couch or somebody that's restricting supply, it's all my fault, sorry.
Right? But
It's not all my fault.
Yeah,
I'm
so-
this part of some
Yeah,
of the fault,
so-
right? Restricting.
certainly you have the international students taking up rental properties, but you have interest rates that are also taking people out of the home buyer pool
Altogether,
for now, so they remain renters. And then we've talked about this also. You also have immigration from one province to another, where people are going to different provinces or different cities because of work-life balance, whatever income level, all those things.
You know what? I'm just thinking about when people move here and they don't have work yet, maybe they don't have they don't have a place to rent. They might be couch surfing,
Yeah.
or they might rent a hotel long term until they find a place, right? We're also in a military town. Mm-hmm. How many people are in military barracks?
Yeah,
Right? They're not in the rental pool, but they are housed here.
yeah,
Like I lived at Bernays and Naden for, I don't know, a while.
yeah. I know one of my past clients. We got them a place. They loved their home, and he's finished serving, but he was like, I cannot wait to get my own place, but I've had to wait until we reached a certain point in my career.
Yeah, to get out of Belmont Park or something.
Yeah.
Well, there it is, right? There's a lot of things, a lot of factors that are attributing to this in different. Obviously, Victoria's maybe has a few different factors. Compared to some other places in Canada.
Yeah, but what we do know is nationally rents are going up, and not just. I think the only part in here where I saw where rents actually went down in any of that period was in PEI.
Okay.
And there was, let me just see here. I'm going to look it up again here. I think it was minus 0.1%.
Minus just barely.
In August.
Okay.
So
very interesting.
But in general, we have those numbers, and we know that's what's happening. I guess the flip side of that is if you want to find out, maybe you're somebody in that situation, maybe you're like Devin. If you haven't seen the video on Devin, you need to go and see the interview that we did with Devin, where he was in a situation with a young family with their young son, and they were rented for all of their married life and all of their single lives. And when we looked, they were in a situation where they were going to have to leave because the landlord's son was coming back to town and he was going to.
So they were getting evicted. Yeah, that way. Yeah.
And they knew it was coming. So that pressure forced them to do something. And once they actually made the phone call and started talking to a mortgage broker, and we got to talk, they found out, hey, wait a minute, we can actually buy a home.
I was so amazed, surprised that how many people don't realize that would be the biggest encouragement. Don't get swayed by how all of the negative headlines are out there. Go talk to a mortgage broker. Go talk to a realtor.
Yeah.
See what your options are, right? Yeah. And see if you're in a place, and if you're what if you're in a shortfall a little bit. You're not quite where you need to be to go there, but at least you know what you would need.
Yeah.
Like if it's credit, down payment, increase employment income, something like that.
Yeah.
But then you know what your situation is to get you to maybe where you want to go if it's home ownership.
Yep. Yep. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. If you haven't, please take a minute and subscribe to the channel. We are putting out 3+ videos every week, so you want to make sure you subscribe so you're not missing anything. And if you have any questions, maybe you have some comments about where you live in the rental market, or questions about that, or questions about the housing market, certainly put it in the comments as well. So
yeah, you know what? Put in factors that affect your market area, wherever you are, Canada, US, other places that watch this channel. Yeah, put in what is the greatest factor that affects, maybe the rental income or the market prices for homes there.
Yeah. But thank you for joining us.
We'll catch you in the next video.
See ya.